and welcome to Consciousness Now TV. I'm your host, Dr. Veronica Tracy-Smith, and this is the 2012 Consciousness Raising Summit. Today we have Victoria Wilson Jones, who is an experienced mind-body-spirit educator and consultant. She has spent the last 29 years assisting individuals in connecting to their deepest authenticity and their higher purpose, utilizing the transformation energy of the heart center, as well as deep connection to integral awareness. Victoria is a founding member and a past president of the Board of Integral Leadership in Action and the co-owner of Souls on a Journey, a company that creates heart-centered meditation and apps as we know them, for engaging and expanding human consciousness. Another person, an ordinary person, to help change the planet and help us to impact it in a positive way for future generations. Thank you so much, and let's talk to Victoria. Hello and welcome to Consciousness Now TV. Today we have Victoria Wilson Jones with us, and she is an amazing woman, and of all the people that I would feel like doing my own personal work with, this is one person I definitely would seek out to do work with. I met Victoria about 3.5 years ago at the Spiritual Intelligence Conference, where I've met other of the people who have joined the Raising Consciousness Now movement. And Victoria is going to talk to us today about her work, and her focus of today really has been out of her meditation in terms of what is it that she wants to talk about in order to expand consciousness on the planet. And the theme really is what is consciousness, because that's a lot to unpack, and also how do you bring consciousness into your work. So welcome, Victoria. I'm so glad you're here with us today.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
So what I'd love to hear more and educate people about the work that you do, and also how you integrate raising consciousness on the planet in the work that you do.
Great. I do integrally informed, transformative, heart-centered work. I do that in one-to-one session, but I also have done group trips to sacred sites around the world, and then I also do weekend retreats and classes. Right now, my preference has been the one-on-one work, the being called to being essentially a spiritual midwife and helping people give birth to their own higher consciousness has been something that has been very inspiring and moving to me as of late. Not that it's not always inspiring. There are two things that I've studied in the course of my own spiritual journey that have truly transformed my world. And one of them is heart chakra work, transformative work, using the energy of unconditional love to transform. And the other one is integral theory. And integral theory is using a basic map of human consciousness to make sure that we don't leave out any essential parts of growth. So to be able to use that when doing people's spiritual work with them allows me to be ensured that I can help them create a very, very balanced spiritual life and spiritual practice.
Wow, nice. Well said, too. So you're looking at how people work individually, and then in the we space, as we call it, or in a relationship, and then in the world. Is that right?
Absolutely. Everybody has areas that they shy away from and areas that become their center of gravity. And to help people lean into the spaces they shy away from so that they can strengthen them and actually create more balance and wholeness. So whether that person feels more comfortable in an I space or a we space, whether they're more comfortable dealing with the exterior world or their interior world, whether they're more comfortable with the intellect or emotions, whatever their natural lean is, helping them see their strengths, but then using those strengths to really exercise the parts that may have been neglected or disowned, or maybe they weren't even aware of them.
Wow, okay. There's so much going on, and this is a question actually that you wanted me to present because you really did go within to see what do I need to talk about, not just about you. And I thought that was really interesting that you weren't so concerned about, you know, showing all that you've done, but really more, how can I be of service today in this interview? And this is a question that you presented to me about what's happening in our world today from a spiritual perspective, and help us gain some clarity around that.
Just a moment about how the questions were chosen. I've been doing this kind of work for going on 29 years, so I've been at it for a long time. And one of the things that started shifting about 15 years ago was that I stopped creating structures for courses and classes from an outer awareness and started doing it from a space of meditation. Started going in and asking not only my inner wisdom, but asking to connect to the people I'm going to be working with and how can I be of service to their growth. And it started becoming a fuller, richer way to work because my ego was actually doing the work of being in service to what I would call the soul or higher consciousness. And it was taking the time to make sure that those deeper questions were asked. And I think the question of what's happening in the world right now from a spiritual perspective comes from that deeper space. And I believe what's happening is we're being asked to grow up, you know, to really get clear on any of our history, and then to wake up, to deepen and really connect to whatever people want to call that higher self. I call it the soul's radiance. Other people call it higher self. There's many names for it. But how can we allow a healthy, strong, well-developed ego be in service to this deep, radiant wisdom? I believe there's so much complexity of problems in the world that it's only that deep radiance that's going to be able to solve those problems we're facing.
Wow. Yeah. So really doing the work within, and that's definitely a theme. I want to go back to something that you said, and that is talking about the ego. And I know Cindy Wigglesworth talks about helping the ego grow up, and so much of what has been put out there is, you know, in the past, and especially in spiritual communities, is getting rid of the ego, annihilating the ego, transcending the ego so you no longer need the ego. Can you say more about that? Because I think that's really a key part, that we don't really need to, you know, hammer it, kill it, get rid of it. We get to keep our ego. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. The ego has been really vilified spiritually. And we've been taught that it is this bad part of us that we must overcome. And actually, from a spiritual perspective, there are two forces of energy moving through us. The force of ascension, which is our ego human self looking for the divinity that it came from. So it's that looking to be inspired and connected. And then there's the descending force, which is our radiant consciousness seeking physical form. And that is the original sacred union, the marriage between the healthy ego and the radiant self. And their connection is not one of animosity or power struggle. They come into their fullness because of each other. Because of free will, the radiant soulful consciousness cannot be embodied unless permission is given. But also, the human egoic self cannot find its source without accessing that radiant soul self. And so it isn't a war, and was never meant to be a war. The egoic self, when it's well developed and healthy, feels empty unless it finds its source. It longs for the beloved. It longs for its own divinity. The same way that the radiant, soulful self longs to manifest in human form, to actually be able to have the power to take action.
Wow, that is so beautiful, and even the way that you described it is poetic, really. You know, I like to make spirituality concrete, and I'm also one who, I go into my meditation and I have my journal there, or actually all kinds of paper, including my sketchbook. I'm the creative type there. And I say, you know, what is it that I'm meant to teach, and allowing that to come out, and that's what you're doing really today. how can we take what you just said and make it more concrete for people? How do I help my ego grow up? How do I awaken? What does that mean? But how do I do it every day? You know, when maybe I get my feelings hurt, or somebody at work does something, or my spouse or my children. How do I bring that into everyday life?
Well, for me, because I'm also very, very practical, I want a spirituality, as a Native American friend said once, a spirituality that helps me grow corn. So a spirituality that does something practical, and I feel very much that way about it. Having an esoteric message that can't grow legs and walk around simply is not useful to me. So for me, my practice looks like, before I even get out of bed in the morning, hand goes over my heart chakra, and I ask to open up to the energy of love and compassion. That is my intention before I even get out of bed. And it's something that I recommend highly to people that I work with, is that the moment I'm awake, I have just come out of an altered state of consciousness of sleep. I may have just been in causal. I may have just been one with God. And I'm just coming out of that sacred space. Why not ease back into wakefulness by making that commitment, whatever that commitment is? Now, I choose to be a student of love. That is what my desire is to teach from, manifest from, see through love and compassion. That is what I'm in service to. And everyone has to decide what it is that they're in service to. What's that higher calling? And to start out your day recommitting to that before you do anything else. We're talking 15 seconds. So we're not talking about, taking a seat on the cushion or kneeling in front of an altar or going to church. We're talking about the temple and the sacredness of your own bedroom, and the awake moment of bringing your awareness back into your flesh and recommitting to what your life is about. That begins the day. That sets the intention. So this is the very first part that I start out with.
Okay, to bring it one more level, I guess, I teach meditation, and everybody has their own way to meditate, and some people like a mantra. And I encourage people to use a mantra at least for 3 months. And you're talking about having an intention. I know sometimes I can be, excited about this, excited about that, a little bit ADD sometimes. And so I could have an intention of compassion one day because I heard somebody talk about compassion, or maybe it's something I'm working on with my spiritual intelligence skills. Then I hear another talk, or somebody inspires me over here, and then maybe I'm working on something else, or love, and so I could really bounce around. Do you suggest to your clients and people that you work with to have that, in whatever that intention is, for a period of time?
Yeah, absolutely. I usually choose six months myself for people to have an intention, because I believe the body is the densest form of our soul energy. So therefore it takes the longest to change. It requires the most structure. So to be able to really honor that and follow an awareness through, and that actually goes into how do you help grow a healthy ego, because any of us that are energy sensitive at all can feel other people's excitement, and we can get pulled onto other people's intentions quite easily. So to have a healthy ego means that I have spent enough time with myself so that I can name what I'm in service to. And that's one of the things that I'd like to have everybody that works with me do, be able to name what is it they're in service to. And it's not that that might not change over the years. It clarifies, it grows, it includes more. But there is almost always an authentic core energy or an aspect of humanity that people feel a deep need to serve when they're well evolved on their journey. So to stay focused on that gives you the chance to really become a student of what you're in service to.
Oh, wow. I love that. I love that question even for myself. What am I in service to? And even that is awakening question. It helps you and me to look at, what am I waking up to? What am I choosing to focus on? It sounds like it's a broader question to what is my intention for the day. So I want to bring it to really make it concrete here. One thing that I do when I coach is I talk to people about their environment. Obviously, what your environment is, what do you put into your body, you know, do you hydrate? Do you take care of yourself in terms of, you know, your physicalness? What is, you know, do you have a messy desk all the time and feel scattered? Messy desk a lot of times, and I gotta create my little spaces. Waking up in the morning and having that intention, I just want to say it might be great to have it written there. Do you encourage people to have their intention or what they're in service to? Do you have them put it in their environment so they can stay on task or on, I don't like that word on task, but stay in the direction that they want to go? How do you work with people that way?
Yes, they can stay focused. Okay. Absolutely. And I adore sticky notes. I think they're a wonderful thing. So to actually be able to have notes up, I have people put their intention, what they're in service to, as a scrolling marquee on their computer.
Oh, nice.
Because I think that is a modern day prayer wheel. You know, every time it goes by, it puts that intention out there even farther. And then their intention becomes a question. If I'm getting ready to take action, let's say that I get triggered, I'm irritated at somebody, I am thinking about how I might want to handle that. As I center and ask myself, okay, what will serve love? That begins to give me a direction, because to me, whatever I'm in service to, it's not just an interior feeling focus. It is something that guides my actions in the world. When I'm doing couples counseling, one of the things that I will ask couples to do is to start taking a moment and to simply ask themselves, is what I'm getting ready to say actually sound like I love this person?
Great question.
If it doesn't, then find a different way to say it. You know, because if they're coming for couples counseling because they do love each other, okay, then let's let that sucker grow legs and become the structure around how we communicate, how we treat each other. So whatever you're in service to spiritually, that becomes your question when you are looking at any action that you're getting ready to take, when you're looking at what's being triggered, when you're looking at what's being said, when you look at how you talk to yourself, when you look at the contents of your own mind, how are they serving whatever you're in service to?
That is beautiful. That is beautiful. And a question to ask at the critical moments too. Yeah. At the very critical moments, yeah.
Yeah, it's at the moments that we can make change. If at that moment I'm getting ready to say something that is just an old pattern, if I choose to do something different, I am starting something new. There's a new potential blossoming here. And all it took was my mindfulness and my commitment to my own growth.
Right. And to look at that every single day, to let that be your mantra, and then also let the question come in those critical moments. And that sounds to me like really creating more inner wisdom and developing those muscles of inner wisdom.
Yeah. And then at night, you know, taking the time, 5 minutes to journal. And all my clients know that I don't like journaling, and it's a big joke among all of us, but I really adore the results of journaling. And so I recommend that everybody do it, because it's one of the ways to educate the ego. The deep wisdom self is having awarenesses that are moving through us all of the time. But if the ego doesn't take the time to name what it knows, the ego can't use the wisdom. Oh. So to be able to sit and say, what did love teach me today? What did I learn? And 5 minutes of self-reflection around what one's own service work is. It's amazing how much wisdom accumulates over the weeks and months.
I know Paramahansa Yogananda always talked about that, is definitely you wake up and look at your intention and do your meditation, but at the end of the day, he was really big on self-reflection. And if we don't reflect, then, you know, then we keep doing the same behaviors over and over. It's easy to be on the cushion or, you know, be in prayer and asking for things, but then to reflect on your own behavior, that's tough. And it kind of leads me into the question really is, why don't more people do this spiritual work, this deepening work, this kind of growing up and awakening as you talk about it?
I think part of it is just developmental. You know, people are going, you can absolutely trust people to be true to their level of development. You can absolutely trust them to be true to that. There's no doubt about that. So part of it is just people's level of development. Another part of it is that people don't know what needs to be done. When people come to see me, they say, yeah, I know something's really off in my life. I can't find what I'm looking for, but I don't know how to get to it. And so having enough information out there, practical ways for people to integrate, to resolve, to self-reflect, to do whatever it is that's being required at the moment. We need more information out there, probably more people that are teaching very practical things rather than theory. And then plus the last part of it is that the world is a vastly seductive place. There is so much going on that it's easy to be entranced by all the tasking and activity. In fact, when we slow down from engaging in the exterior world and start pulling back to go in, people will even complain about that it feels boring because they've lost all the stimulation out here. And it's just that it feels very, very different. And we need to learn to gracefully bridge that interior and that exterior, because you cannot do your interior work in the exterior world. It's just simply not possible. But if you're an interior person, it's never going to manifest out there if you don't do something different. You know, so I think that combination of things, just developmentally, not having information, and then just the seduction of the outer world. I think those are all things that stop people from going deeper.
Yeah, and what we're told we're supposed to do. And the other side of that, you bring up a good point, is if someone is an introvert versus an extrovert, the extrovert has a much easier time being out in the world, and the introvert has a much easier time being in their internal world and in themselves. So I kind of heard you say, you know, that whatever you are, there's a need to do the other. So I'm more of an introvert, so pulling myself into the we space or the relational space, which I love, but I can't stay there an extremely long period of time, or I get wiped out physically and mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And yet I know that that's a part where I cherish it and I grow the most, and then I come in back to my world. So kind of doing that dance and finding the dance that works for you really is what you're talking about, it sounds like.
Well, even knowing that it's supposed to be a dance, that it's okay to be challenged. You know, I too am an introvert. And so when I adore doing my service work, I adore teaching, and at some point I have to pull back and get renewed because I will get deeply fatigued by it. And people that are introverts are that way. We renew by ourselves. That's just what we do. And to know self well enough to know that just because you're an introvert, just because I'm an introvert, does not mean that we don't love humanity and want to be of service. You know, it simply means that we have to nurture and care for ourselves in a particular way, in the same way that the extroverts I know have a harder time pulling back from people and going into that quiet interior space, because that doesn't feel as good to them as it feels to be out there. So to be able to say, okay, this is my growing edge. My strength is how I give my gift to the world, but it's my vulnerability that changes me and allows me to grow. So for people to know the difference, my service work, how I give my gift to the world, is not necessarily what's changing me and stretching me and growing me. Where I'm vulnerable and where I lean into it, that's what's changing me.
Beautiful. So that's the edge.
And I have to be able to do things. That's my edge. And to be able to know that the edge is never comfortable. It's exciting. It can be overwhelming. It can be frightening. It can be compelling, but it's not comfortable.
How do we, one, get ourselves to the edge? How do we know when we're at the edge? And how do we keep growing and not retreating at that edge? Can you share with us on that?
Sure. That's where integral theory for me comes in, is making sure that I've checked myself or anybody that I'm working with in multiple areas. You know, how are they doing in their eye space? Do they have enough self-reflection time? You know, do they really know what their values are? Do they really know what they're aligned to? Are they really spiritually connected? And then are they taking that kind of action out in the world? Do they act from that awareness? Are they letting that depth help them grow in their behaviors in the world that can be seen. And how about their we space? How do they share we space? Are they so comfortable in their I that they only tap into the we? Are they well developed in their we space, maybe to the point of being a pathological caregiver? You know, how about the systems in the world? Because I see a lot of spiritual people try to avoid what's going on in the world. I have people say things to me like, well, I don't watch the news. And I might ask them, well, if you actually believe that you are a soul and you chose this time period to be born into because you could be of service, don't you think it might be helpful to know what's going on in the systems of the world? That maybe that information isn't to confuse you and make you lost. Maybe it's to inform you. So we can use just the basic quadrants of integral theory, just the quadrants, to look at where are people's growing edge. Which of those quadrants do they like to really rest in? Where do they shy away from? And then we can take it even further by helping them look at what typology they may be, what states of consciousness they prefer to be in. We can keep adding to those dimensions to make sure that a person is addressing the beautiful complexity of their own being. Because people have the tendency to want to simplify it because it feels safer. And the truth is,
no, we're messy and we have a lot a lot of areas, and we're so many.
We hang out over the edges. We're drippy. We're gooey. We're wonderful. We're magnificent. It's
and there's a lot of times I feel like, well, maybe I'm just too complicated, because a lot of people will tell me, well, they have this figured out or that figured out, and you know, and I think, well, I had that figured out when I was this age, and now I don't have it figured out, and it's changed. And I feel like I'm constantly learning about myself and trying to figure it out, trying to transcend where I'm at, and yet, you know, not transcend and avoid, because I think there's a lot of people who do that. Like, there were times in my life I said, I can't watch the news, you know. It's taking me off my path, and that's where I needed to be at that point. So I just want people who hear this to say, well, if that's where you're at, that's okay. And then you might also want to look at this. So it's not about anybody's bad or wrong for where they're at or what they're doing, but kind of saying, is there something I'm avoiding? And posing that question, because I hear that a lot of people like, yes, we want to awaken the world and do my part, and yet I can't watch anything that's going on, and I can only see what's good, and that is going in life like with blinders on. So
yeah, I think there's a real difference between having an allergic reaction to something, which is showing us that something's being triggered or if something's being vilified, versus the inner wisdom of, I need to withdraw right now. I'm excruciatingly sensitive, which we can go through excruciatingly sensitive times when we're shifting something energetically inside ourselves. So there's that wisdom that says, this isn't bad. I need to withdraw right now because I need to be cared for. You wouldn't take a caterpillar that has moved into its cocoon and take it off of its twig and throw it into the wind. It needs stability and safety and security while it's transforming. And we go through those times too. So what I look at when somebody's telling me that they are going to take this action or that action is the action coming from a neutral space of inner wisdom? Because there are the times to retreat and transform. Or is somebody vilifying something? Are they dissociating? Are they rejecting something? Are they saying that whatever I see out here, this isn't me? Well, if we are all one at the deepest level, if we are not only arising from all there is, but we are also the ground we are arising from, then it makes sense that everything I see in the world is somehow me too. So if there are many times when, in fact, it's even my policy now, I don't watch the news more than once a week. If I feel too overwhelmed by the full onslaught presence of TV, I will read it instead. But it's important for me to be able to feel what are the energies going on in the world. Why? Because
anyway,
I will
right,
feel them
yeah.
anyway. I will be able to identify what I'm feeling so that I know, oh, is this something coming in from the exterior that I can find a match on the inside of work with? Or is this something that's emerging just from me that I'm projecting out there? because that all becomes a part of the shadow work, is that there would not be conflict in the world and war in the world if there were not conflict and war inside of us. It is that simple. So if I want that to change, I need to find how to let it change inside of here. I need to do that, and then I become an antidote. I become an antidote. I'm not afraid of that shadow. People talk about, well, I would never do that kind of violence. I don't know a single person that at some point in their journey would not murder a part of their consciousness they didn't like if they could. I know I certainly have had parts that I've thought, if I could get rid of this part of me, I would. Okay. That is simply an energetic version of what we see actually happening at the grossest level. And I think we all need to come real clean with that and say we can only heal this out here as we claim it and own it.
So
as
really,
our own shadow.
Again, raising consciousness comes down to our own healing work at the deepest levels. And then where do we go? So we're touching on that. We do our own healing work. We have people in our lives that we want to come along on this spiritual journey, this spiritual path, and we feel disconnected, like they're not maybe in our world. How can we help those people in our own world, in our own corner of the world? And more broadly, when I'm watching the news, how can I be an antidote? How can I be a healing force on this planet and engage in that in a meaningful way that is concrete? Again, bringing it back to our practices. How can I do that?
Well, I look at something like watching the news, and we can always do something energetically. Always. We are energy systems. We were energy systems before this body was put here, and that's what we'll be after it's gone. And I can generate an energy of love, compassion. I can do Tonglen meditation. I can breathe in the suffering that I'm seeing and become the Buddha and breathe out peace. I can send healing energy. I can believe in the souls. I can pray for them. I remember going to Dachau in Germany, to the concentration camp, and being brought to tears when I read the inscription on the outside of the Carmelite nuns convent that is right there on the property. And it said that their mission was to pray for those who had forgotten to pray for themselves. And the idea, it still, gives me absolute goosebumps all over to think that the silent order of nuns, that's what they're doing. They're praying for the people who've forgotten to pray for themselves. And Carolyn May said once that she believed that prayers followed a soul until they were willing to use them.
Wow.
Which I love that idea. So even if we're sending energy to something and it's not being used at the moment, it will stay until it can be used. And to me, that is the nature of love. So loving the world at large, when I can't do anything else, I can sing, I can dance, I can pray, I can give offering, I can do Tonglen. I can always do something with my energy body, always. And as far as the people around me that we may be at different levels of consciousness, I look at first and foremost, am I being true and authentic to myself? Am I being authentic to my own level of development? And then that second part is, have I fallen deeply in love with their level of development? Because I believe with every fiber of my being that you cannot teach a level of development you do not love. You can chastise it, you can manipulate it, you can try and rescue it. There's all kinds of things you can do, but you can't truly teach it. And if I can look at a different level of development, and if I've fallen in love with myself at that level, I not only deepen my self-acceptance and self-love, but I now become a wonderful reflection for them for the validity of where they're at. And it seems to be when we receive enough attention, love, acceptance, something else starts happening. It's a catalyst in and of itself. Something else starts taking place. But as long as I'm looking at somebody else's level of development as incorrect or wrong, at one level or another, I am misusing my own power, because each level builds upon the next.
So that really goes back to yourself again. Like, you have to go back inside yourself and fall in love with yourself at those levels of development. So including, you know, a lot of times people say, oh, I was really awful at this age or that age. And, you know, my teenage years, you know, I was hell on wheels, basically, and trying to do everything destructive that I could, mostly to myself. To go back and do compassion and forgiveness around that part of yourself, and understanding even.
Yeah, to bring my teenager understands your teenager very well. It's busy doing all the same things. And to, in deep meditation, to actually bring out that energy body that's still alive, still existing, that adolescent energy body, and to sit with her and love her, because nobody understands her better than I do. I totally, totally get this being. And I understand why she was shut down. And I understand why she was self-destructive. And I understand why it was impossible for anyone to befriend her. I get it. I get it. And to be able just to feel that overwhelming sense of absolute unconditional love and acceptance for her. Just to get it diffuses any shame that self may still carry, infuses any need to apologize for having had a really difficult stage. And instead, what I come out with when I talk to that part is, thank you for enduring. Thank you for being able to get us to hear, because without you, without your strength, you know, without your capacity to just shut off and keep moving
exactly
forward,
right. And that's true for a lot of people. They would not have survived. And you know, and that's where denial and shutting down and the ego can be of service, and even loving the ego in those parts for being of service during those times, especially. Yeah.
Absolutely. To me, that is actually looking at our own journeys through the eyes of our soul that really does see the meaning, worth, and value, as well as the necessity, and that can find the beauty in that great necessity. So it's taking it out of doing self-reflection work through the ego from the ego, but being able to also do self-reflection work through the largest part of your consciousness you have available, that is in a space of deep, deep, neutral loving, which is what we call compassion, to be able to love deeply from a space of neutrality, and to get a bigger picture of the necessity of this. I have so much shadow material in my history, really very negative things that happened to me growing up. And the beauty of that is that I can sit with other people's difficult journeys and I do not flinch. I can sit with them in a space of depth and compassion. I don't need their journeys to change for me. I don't need them to jump through flaming hoops. We can simply be together and watch what wants to emerge. And my history has served me well. It was very difficult to live through those things, and yet they serve love.
Beautiful.
Very
wow.
well.
That really puts it all together, doesn't it? And you really do embody that love and that compassion. I see that towards yourself, and I see that as you're sharing your wisdom with us today, and your compassion, and the skills that you're showing us too. I really I had a really tough growing up years as well, and see that as my gifts for accelerating maybe my personal and my spiritual growth, my gifts for sitting with people, as you say, in that painful spot. So that's a whole reframe. So I want to say that to people watching this. If you're sitting there saying, well, I've got this whole history and all this baggage, yeah, well, bless it. It is your gift, and maybe you don't know how it's your gift yet. Maybe that's still unfolding for you, but see if you can't take that different perspective and come from that soul radiance, as Victoria calls it. I love that, Victoria, that you say soul radiance, you know, higher self, soul radiance. There's so many different ways to call our best self. that's a beautiful, I mean, I can really see radiating light from that place. It's very visual, and I like that, because sometimes higher self is like, well, where is she up there, you know? Higher, it must be up there somewhere. I have to dust her off, see if I can find her. I don't know, is she in a closet somewhere? Or he, or it. So I really appreciate all that you've shared and your vulnerability with that. And I really believe that vulnerability is the new courage, the new strength. And we as a society have seen it as weakness. And you don't show your vulnerabilities because you don't want the other person to see your vulnerabilities, because then you won't have as much power. So again, that power struggle with the egos. And coming from vulnerability, there's nothing that people can really do to you at that point. You know, I mean, that vulnerability and being comfortable with it is, to me, the new courage, or the real courage, if you want to call it that.
I love the idea that what we all have to deal with is our sacred woundings. And the wounding isn't what's important. The skill we have to develop to heal, that's why the wounding is important, because of who we become in service to the healing. Who we become in service to the healing, that's why the sacred wound's important, is just that, because of who we're going to become. And so for people to recognize that what they're seeing with the sacred wounding is they're seeing the fragile side, but there is the other resolved side of that is absolute strength.
Yeah, and that takes trust.
Strength. And that vulnerability to me, that vulnerability to me is, I don't see vulnerability anymore as weakness. I see vulnerability as the capacity to be deeply touched by anything and deeply affected by it. So if I'm not walled off and I am open, then I am going to be vulnerable to love, to transcendence, to radiance, to sharing, to growth. I'm going to be deeply affected
including
by all of
the painful
those
parts of it, you know,
yes.
to feel the pain of it, to feel the pain in the world. And really that's why we've come together in the Raising Consciousness Now movement, is to be a shining light and to say that it's all okay, and how do we transcend the place that we're at, maybe mentally, emotionally, spiritually, or in our body, and work with that and go forward. And you know, and it keeps coming back to our own personal work. So if you really feel like you can't do anything about what's going on in the world, I think, Victoria, you've given us some really great concrete ways to be of service, and be of service from home to maybe a third world country. You know, there's so many ways to do that. And I just wonder, before we close here, if there's a bit of wisdom that you'd like to share with the viewers, something they can make their own on the next steps for them to take on their spiritual journey.
Yeah, if you have never learned how to do a basic heart-centered focusing, it's probably one of the most accessible tools that I can think of that can move you very, very quickly into more expanded state of consciousness. And just to be able to add that into your tool bag can be a wonderful thing to move forward with, because it will deepen every other thing that you do. And the easiest way to do that is just recognize that energy follows intention. You know, if I want to move my arm and everything in my arm works correctly, my brain isn't actually figuring out how to send nerve impulses and stimulate the muscles. I'm just thinking what I want my arm to do, and it does it. Well, the energy system is the same way. As you focus on what you want it to do, it will begin to perform that function. Now, granted, like any other muscle, in the beginning it may be weak, and so the more you use it, the stronger it gets. But heart-centered focus would be one of the greatest gifts that I could offer. And we can invite everybody to participate right now. All you need to do. So you can begin this process just by closing your eyes. Let yourself take a deep and mindful breath in. And in the privacy of your own mind, just give yourself permission to release and relax. Remember that the air around you is filled with life force, and just the act of mindfully breathing brings more of that life force not only into your body, but into every part of your being. So just allow your breath to be slow, deep, and even, and begin to focus your awareness at the very center of your chest. Just imagine a pool of emerald green light resting there. If you see the light, that's lovely. If not, just imagine it there. Imagine that pool of emerald green light as being the color of the heart center, the color of unconditional love, the color of compassion. And just by focusing on this energy, you can increase your access to this feeling, to this awareness. And just imagine that pool of light beginning to send out waves of emerald green light from the center of your chest into every direction. And with those waves of light, a sense of peace, well-being, a sense of warmth and centeredness begins to strengthen within you. And you can even imagine that your body is clear glass being filled with light all the way from the soles of your feet to the tips of your fingers to the top of your head. And from this space, take a moment to focus on anything in life that deeply inspires you or that you deeply love. Just imagine that you could focus on that from the center of your heart. And then just releasing what you're focusing on. Setting the intention within yourself that you would like this feeling of peace and calm and centeredness to remain with you. And then just very gently allowing your awareness to return. And when you're ready, just opening your eyes.
Wow, I'm relaxed. That was beautiful.
It was a little 4-5 minute meditation. That's a real easy thing to do. It's simply focusing on the heart chakra and then deepening it by bringing forward anything that you feel really called to at the moment. When I made the comment about something that I love, what I thought of at that moment was my children. I just thought of them, and it increased that feeling of love and compassion. But sometimes it can be spirit, nature, friends, art, all kinds of things can pop up in there. But simply strengthening what it is that I'm attuning.
Great, that was wonderful. I also want to say that you do have meditations on iTunes. Is that right? And people can go to Amazon.com to find your meditations as well, and we'll put those links underneath. And they're also available on the Raising Consciousness Now website, that you can find more information about Victoria, and also get her meditation CDs. Really wonderful. I'd like more of that, please. That was great. So thank you so much for being here today. It was a wonderful conversation. I don't even feel like it was an interview, more of a conversation with you. And I think you've really gifted us all with so much. So thank you for being part of this today.
Oh, I'm just delighted. I'm so happy to be a part of anything that's helping our world evolve. It's just fabulous.
Yeah, well, you're such a gift, and I thank you so much for your time. This is Consciousness Now TV and the 2012 Consciousness Raising Summit. Thank you so much for joining us, and if you haven't watched any other interviews, there's more to come. And once the summit is over, you can also go to Consciousness Now TV and you can watch all the interviews. They're available for free, and everyone has volunteered their time to share their wisdom with all of us. So thank you for joining us and have a great day.